Alright, hello everybody. It's October 22nd, and I'm making another astrology video, as you can probably gather, right? I haven't made one in a while. The last one I made was right before the solar eclipse in Libra, and it was around that time that the conflict in Israel and Palestine was breaking out that I made that video, and I didn't go into very much detail about it, but I think that was part of the reason why I kind of slowed down. Like, there was a bunch of transits that were happening. Like, I was thinking about doing a video for we had a Mercury Cazimi in Libra after the solar eclipse, but I just decided it was better to stay quiet. And, like, one of the things that I do is that I do tarot cards, and sometimes I will, before making a video, I'll pull tarot cards to, should I record a video or should I wait to develop my idea or pass on this one? And there's something about, I have to admit that with the whole, the times that we're living in and when these different conflicts and wars and stuff like that break out, there may be a lot of things that I may not be content with in my own life, but it certainly puts things in perspective that at least you're not in the middle of an armed conflict, right? And that, you have to take in consideration your perspective of living in an area that's not, subject to bombs and war and all this terrible stuff going on. And, and also, I have certain, I'm not going to get into any sort of, if I'm just a guy who's struggling to get an astrology channel off the ground, and I don't have a lot of political power. I don't have a lot of insight into, if you want to learn about that stuff, you can talk to somebody else about it, right? Like, I'm not here to act like I'm some expert who's going to give you all the right opinions on international conflicts and political stuff. That's not really what I'm all about, right? And, so today, anyways, what's going on today? We just had Mercury ingress into Scorpio, and as I record this video, the Sun is at the 29th degree of Libra, about to enter Scorpio, and Mars is already in Scorpio. And so a couple things to keep in mind about this is that we just had the Sun squaring Pluto. Pluto's at around 27 degrees, so that's separating now, but we just had the Sun-Pluto dynamic, which, like I said, I haven't been making as many videos, but that is an influence, still active, the Sun square Pluto. Mars is roughly, also in Taurus, we've got Jupiter and Uranus, so Mars is going to be making oppositions to those planets. And also, something to keep in mind is that eventually we're going to get a Mars Cazimi, which is like the synodic cycle of Mars and the Sun. It's the ending and a new beginning of a Mars cycle. And so that is a kind of a death and rebirth of Mars, and maybe fitting as we have all this kind of war stuff going on in the background, right? To have the god of war and Mars going through this kind of a moment. And, I was kind of struggling because I did have some ideas to sort of try to point out how I see the impact or the influence of Mars and Scorpio, but just with all the stuff going on in the world, I felt kind of, if I'm only speaking from my own perspective, it feels kind of inconsequential with all this stuff going on. I didn't want to be rude or anything like that, but I didn't, it's a kind of a... Anyways, I'm going to try my best to approach this dynamic of Mercury, Mars, and the Sun in Scorpio. And I have been doing some divination work and stuff like that, and doing some reading. And one of the things that has come up for me is the idea of Scorpio having to do with the depths, right? Like, that's one of the things people often say about Scorpio, is that Scorpio is deep. Scorpio is penetrating, right? And there's, of course, there is this kind of sexual connotation. I mean, if you look at the whole thing about what body part Scorpio rules the genitalia, right? And so Scorpio rules the sex drive and stuff like this. And there's this this whole thing about like I was just thinking, this is maybe a bad joke, but like there's this it's kind of funny that like like I spent a year in Australia when I was younger, and in Australia the word to root or to rooted is like a slang for sex, but they don't say that here in North America. But like over there, like the whole idea of like even like root beer, it gives people a chuckle because they have that as part of their slang, right? And so there's this meme going around at some point in time, like what a woman really wants in life is to be deeply rooted. And then there's all these people would share this meme with like a kind of a straight face without like apparently nobody having any kind of there's no whatever. But there's that kind of thing about like you could look at it in terms of just like a kind of a vulgar sexual thing with Scorpio, or else you could look at the going deeper into a situation, being more rooted into a situation. And I've also been thinking, went to go read some more James Hillman recently, and I have to admit, I don't want to be too harsh on anybody, but like one of the reasons like I don't post much on Facebook anymore is that when you try, how does Facebook work? You join groups of people who like similar topics, and there's one guy who seems to, like, he's kind of carved out his niche on the internet. Is this one guy posts a lot about Hillman, but I think he even said in his own words, he's like, I'm just talking about my James Hillman, what James Hillman means to me. And it kind of makes me realize that, like, based on your own perspective, like many people, you could have a whole bunch of people reading the same author, and yet how that author speaks to a person may be very different compared to like how does this resonate for you? What is your motivation to read this stuff, and what does it mean? And one of the, I've kind of personally, I find it interesting to follow this guy because sometimes he does post some good quotes or something like that, but I find his approach, there's something about his approach that I find I have a problem with, in that people will look at certain qualities, like, let's take with Scorpio, we're talking about depths, or we're talking about deepening, right? And Hillman, in his own perspective, like, what Hillman says himself, he's taking a kind of a polytheistic phenomenological approach, which means that rather than taking one archetype, one image, and saying that this is what it's all about, he's looking at as if you were in a pantheon where you had all sorts of different gods and all sorts of different characters, or that you had all sorts of different parts or personalities, and it's not to privilege one thing over the other, right? And I find that this is, people will take this thing that I like the idea of depths, right? Which is, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, really, right? But there's often this kind of bias, especially with things like Jungian psychology and stuff like that, is that people get into it because they feel like dealing with life is a sort of a superficial thing, and that something like depth psychology promises this thing about deepening, about going deeper into something. And because I was starting to read this Hillman book. Here, I'll just show it. That I think it relates, we're going to Scorpio season, and we just had the Sun Square Pluto, and that, I'm not doing the Terrible Love for War book. I'm looking at Kinds of Power, right? Which is another, I think, kind of Plutonian, Scorpionic kind of thing. People say that Scorpios are all into have a kind of a power thing going on, right? That maybe more so than some of the other signs, right? And there's this thing I read here about where he's talking about looking at growth in terms of deepening rather than just an expansion or getting more, but going deeper into something. But I'm just saying that before making this into a video that's just like, you know, we've got a Mars in Scorpio, we're going to have Sun and Mercury in Scorpio, and we're going to have this, it's a great time to go deeper into something. It's important to look at the context of your own life and what's going on, and basically look at it in terms of deepening is like a move that you can make. You can choose to make this move of going deeper into something, or else you don't, but you don't have to. It's not necessary. Sometimes it may not even be a good idea, right? And I did an I Ching reading. I threw some coins recently, and I don't do I Ching as often as tarot, because I find there's something that I Ching can be extremely potent. You don't need to do it a lot, right? And that there's also this thing too where I was in one of the Discord server where I was talking to some people about I Ching. I was kind of confused, because there's some other guy talking about how the I Ching can, it can be really kind of like unforgiving or something, or like if something is not, like, you know, you'll get served by the I Ching if you think, you know, the I Ching will, it'll set you straight if you're really off track or something like that. But I mean, the thing about the tone of it though was like that the divination can be really harsh, or the divination can be really disappointing or put you off or something. And I have to say that the divination reading I did, I feel like it wasn't, this didn't seem like a very hopeful or encouraging reading but it's like the value of the reading isn't just to like be the I Ching tells you if something is good or not. It tells you this is the situation that you're approaching, and what is good is that it gives you some insight into what would help in your way of approaching it, right? If you're approaching a situation that sucks, it's not going to do you any good for the I Ching to tell you that it's a good situation when it's not a good situation. Like, to just pull the wool over your eyes and just go la la la, everything's nice when it's not. I think it actually helps to be like, no, this is, the situation you're in kind of sucks, but this is an intelligent, wise way to approach a shitty situation. And then if you can grok that, then that's more helpful than being like, oh, maybe I should just pretend it's something that it's not, right? And so so I don't know if I want to give my whole I Ching of tell you exactly which hexagrams I got, but what it changed into anyways was this hexagram 29 called repeating chasms, right? And the way you do I Ching is that there's a 6-line hexagram, and certain lines are fixed and certain lines are changing, and that the ones that change are supposed to have more significance for you. You're supposed to pay more attention to these changing lines. And the repeating chasm is like, imagine if you're going down into like a ravine or something, like a canyon or something, right? And that as you go deeper into the canyon, or you go into like a kind of a cave or a pit or a tunnel or something, right? And it's like, the I Ching's all about flow, right? That it's kind of like, if this is the situation, if that's where the flow is going, and you want to be somewhere else, you're not going to get there by resisting it. But the whole thing about going deeper into this chasm may not be productive necessarily, right? So this is the whole thing. I might read a bit of the James Hillman, but I wanted to, one of these changing lines that I got was, I'll read it to you here anyways, right? Well, maybe I'll read a couple of them. Line 3. And so this is my I Ching. I'm reading from Hilary Barrett's I Ching. This was recommended to me by Spencer Michaud. It's a great book. I recommend it if you want. Alternative to the Wilhelm Baines, which is also good. But anyways, I'll just read a little bit from this. I'm not going to read the whole hexagram, just a few lines. And with Hilary Barrett's commentary. Line 3. Coming to chasm on chasm. Sheer sides also a resting place. Entering into the pit within the chasm, do not act. And Hilary Barrett says, down and down you go into the depths. Sometimes it seems as though if you just push a little further in, you'll reach a simple solution. This is a delusion. You're in a deep hole and there's nothing useful you can do about it now. Put your spade down, take the opportunity to rest. Knowing the limits of what you can do can be a rest in itself. Line 4. A cup of wine, a pair of dishes, using earthenware. Let in with ropes from the window. In the end, no mistake. Imagine someone isolated in a prison pit, with just a small opening to the world above, and help lowered through the opening. With a link to the world above the pit, there's no longer any need to dig further down. This is a very simple picture. There's an opening and a connection, and there is help. It's not much. You may wish it could be more or faster, but there's really no call for a more elaborate offering. Simplicity and discretion help to ensure the connection can be made smoothly, where grand gestures might alert the guards and trigger a defensive reaction. So it's kind of like, the person is either stuck in prison or stuck in a cave. It also kind of reminds me a bit of it's kind of disturbing, but in The Silence of the Lambs, where the serial killer has the person in the pit and he's lowering down the moisturizer to put the lotion on the skin. It's a little bit like that. It's but this is pretty scorpionic though, right? But I mean, in that situation is maybe not a good example, because what the help you're getting isn't help. It's just from the serial killer, right? But in this situation, you're stuck in a situation, and the question of what I'm talking about, the images, right? And the James Hillman's about an imagistic psychology. And there's this whole thing about depth psychology, and deepening is a option. It is something you can do, but in a situation where you're the help, in certain situations, the help isn't going to come from burrowing deeper and deeper into the hole. You don't want to go deeper and deeper into the hole. You want to get the hell out of there, right? So you don't want to do that. You want to, but if you have the kind of it could be a beautiful thing. If you imagine a cave that's all dark, but there's a kind of a opening, then you're not going to rock climb your way out of the opening, or if you do, you might just fall into the cave and hurt yourself. But there's at least you could talk to, you're the boy in the well, and people are giving you stuff and helping you out, and it may not be much, but you can survive, and there's at least something there to be hopeful about. But to be the solution in the situation is, I'm just going to try to dig deeper and deeper into the cave, and then you're just gonna waste time and energy, or get more mired into the muck, right? And that's what I was thinking. Also, it goes with this whole thing in the Twin Peaks season 3, where it's all dig yourself out of the shit, right? You want to, if you're stuck in the shit, it may help to dig yourself out of it. But there was a problem with depth psychology and this deepening, is that you don't. If you're in something where there may actually be some sort of gold, or there may be something good there, it may not, it may be fool's gold. You may be digging for nothing, right? And so I just wanted to keep that in mind, that there may be an inclination to dig deeper, but it may not always be the move you want to make, right? So with that in mind, that deepening may not always be a good idea given the situation you're in. This is James Hillman is offering some alternative ideas of what growth means, and he's talking about deepening as a form of growth. So I'm going to contrast that. I just wanted to give that as a preface, and I'm going to contrast that with Hillman talking about the values of deepening and kinds of power. But also keep in mind that he's writing this for a kind of a business audience, right? So I'm just going to read this little bit on deepening. I'll have a sip of tea first. Deepening. The downward direction cannot simply mean decline, since organic models insist that things can't grow upward unless they grow downward at the same time, like most plants. The downward direction differs from downsizing because downward refers to depth, to the deepening of feelings and relational insights. 30 years of self-help, marriage counseling, and recovery have been influencing the entire nation towards deepening. Deepening in organizations can take many cues from these lessons in the private sphere without following them literally. Deepening starts with what is happening, staying in the mess, staying power. This could translate into staying with the organization and in the job. Career advancement would not require transfer and moving elsewhere to broaden and gain experience or to get out of the present mess. Gain in any way part of the naive growth model. Deepening insists no avoidance and no escape. Stay planted. No leave of absence. Clean up the mess. Gary Snyder, the poet and philosopher of nature, declares that the best way, maybe the only way to change a situation, is to imagine, even to declare, that you will stay where you are in your locale the rest of your life. Deepening forces an organization, like a marriage, to go into itself to get to the bottom of its troubles. Going to the bottom does not stop at the bottom line, but goes into those supporting myths and philosophies on which an organization, again like a marriage, rests. What will be sacrificed to achieve its aims and to what cost? What corners is it willing to cut? What deceits does it practice? Can it ever be content, or must it be perpetually under pressure for ever more growth called success? Eventually, deepening gets down to bedrock ideas and the moral grounds which, like marriage, make partnership in the organization possible. Does this organization have a fundamental vision which I can share? Does it desire the same goals? Do we practice similar principles? What truly, realistically are its principles, and what are mine? Are we joined in a marriage for money? Is our partnership a utilitarian relationship? That is, are we useful to each other, and therefore do I use the business as it uses me? The more I stick with these issues, and the more the organization can stay with its own self-questioning depths, the more both I and it may be actually growing, in the sense of growth as evolving and maturing. This growth could be called a growth of soul. As in the garden or a marriage, deepening brings ugly, twisted things out of the soil. It's a work in the dirt. And so this is why, I'm reading this in context, because maybe for you, the listener, listening to my thing, you may read some of this and see how it may apply to your life and see how it may be valuable. But I have to say that in the context where I was asking a question about my I Ching reading, the question that I was asking specifically had to do with basically the fact that I live here in my hometown with my family, my mother and my sister, and that I don't have really a social connection. I don't have really friends that I hang out with, and that it right now the kind of family arrangement works in terms of having a place to live and paying the bills and having whatever, like a somewhat of a workable family dynamic. But it's categorically different. Like you could be people that are like a husband and wife in a marriage, and you want to deepen into the relationship because you're committed to your wife, and that if there's any when you're this whole depth thing, like you're deepening into it because whatever kinds of problems are there are going to be like come up, right? You're excavating out of the dirt, right? And this is what Scorpio is really good at, right? But my perspective is that, first of all, when it comes to like staying with the trouble, staying in the situation, staying with the mess, is that, you know, I don't know if I need to explain it, but I'm not really interested into deepening into a relationship with my mother. I'm not really interested into deepening a relationship with my sister. And I'm not also really interested into deepening into a relationship with my hometown. Although I have to admit, though, that compared to a lot of other places where I could live, that where I live is not really that bad, right? I have some friends that I've talked to on the internet that have moved to other places that, you know, there's some from, you know, you talk to old high school friends or people that you knew in high school and people move away. Oh, I wish I still lived in, you know, in this town that you live. And I'm like, what do you like about it? I don't know. So this is kind of thing that, like, maybe I only have a very surface relationship with the place that I live, and that by, you know, making commitment to stay in this place, that I could, you know, deepen my relationship to the community around me, to the town around me. But at the same time, it could also be that, like, this is, you know, if you're feeling stuck here, like it's a prison or something like this, it's like you're caught in a trap. And the point is you don't, like, you know, you can ask yourself very simply, like, the situation that you're in, do you want to you want to plant your roots, become more rooted into the situation? Or would you rather make it so that you are more open to the flow? That if the currents of life, if a certain movement comes that will take you into a different situation, take you into a different place, that you don't actually really want to be rooted, right? You don't want you want to be able to be like, oh, hey, look, an opportunity to do something else, an opportunity not to be stuck here, you know? I can, you know, so, and this is the kind of thing with that, you know, you can't, it's not just that deepening is always the answer, that you have to look at deepening or depth in relation to whatever, you know, with the actual situation you're in, and whether or not that even makes sense, right? And I have to also admit that, like, I'm probably going to, I don't know, like, I'm making this astrology video today, but I have been sort of rethinking this whole thing, because a while ago when I was recovering from my health problems, I took a break for about, I don't know, 6 months or something like that. And I started making astrology videos around last, you know, I renewed my astrology practice to make videos in the middle of Christmas time. And that's what I realized something, that I made this video where I was complaining, or I was lamenting the whole fact that, like, not only do I not have friends in this town, but not that my family has alienated themselves from the rest of the family. And then I kind of realized that in my last video that I made, where I was talking about Canadian Thanksgiving, that I'm basically just repeating the same thing. I'm just like, and that, what am I going to do? In Christmas, I'm going to make another video like, oh, boo-hoo, woe is me, Christmas is depressing. Like, you know, I have this kind of thing, I've already done enough of that stuff, and I don't know if that is, like, you know, exactly just dwelling in negativity, right? You're just deepening into the, you know, I don't need to, you know, do a kind of a family excavation where I dig out all the skeletons in the closet and say, this is why my you know, my mother hates her family, or this is why, you know, why nobody gets along, or this is why my friends from high school haven't talked to me in 20 years, or whatever it is, right? Like, I don't need to deepen into that stuff. The point is, like, there's no solution that's going to come from that, right? And it's better to say that, like, you know, if there's something, be careful of what you deepen yourself into. You don't want to get deep into the shit. You know, you don't want to get, like, you may just be like, oh, well, this is a really awful skeleton you've got in your closet. That's horrifying. You know, can I leave now? Can I get out of here? Like, what the fuck is the point of this excavation anyways, right? Like, rather than just disturbing yourself, like, what's the positive thing that can grow out of this, right? I don't know. So that is basically what has come up for me in my own divination practice around this Scorpio season. I think, you know, you can apply it to the planets by looking at Mercury is a person who has a degree of being able to make a decision, or being able not just to make a decision, but being able to exercise a degree of discernment, that to be not every dark shadowy cave do you need to dig yourself into and find the you know, there may not be hidden treasure. It may just be a bunch of scary skeletons and big spiders crawling around. You know, you may not get anything good out of this particular depth project. You know, it maybe actually make more sense to just, like, what I like about the I Ching is that even if being stuck in the repeating chasm is not a very, it doesn't seem like a very optimistic situation, the I Ching will say, you know, man, don't work on burrowing yourself into this, just chill, just relax, right? And then, you know, if something, and you've got the people lowering down sandwiches to you as you're stuck in the well, and then maybe eventually they'll figure out a way to get you out of there, or things will change, but like trying to dig deeper into the well isn't going to get you anywhere, right? And that's why, you know, I'm not going to be, you know, there's all sorts of problems in the world, and that trying to drill into the depths of them may not be the answer. That is the message of this video. Hopefully this does something for you. Thanks for supporting my channel, and stay tuned for more, I guess. Okay, thank you very much.